NH10, directed by Navdeep Singh, is a thriller about the horrors faced by a young, newly married urban couple who get attacked by rural hoodlums on a weekend trip through the national highway in Haryana. This is a slasher genre picture starring Anushka Sharma in the lead role. Neil Bhupalam plays her husband. Darshan Kumar, as a hardcore Haryanvi, leads a gang of goons.
You know, Mayank, given the fact that we didn't shoot last week, this review comes a week late. Already a lot of critics have appreciated the film. It's done rather well for itself, admirably for itself at the box office. So it's already out there and doing well. I think not without good reason. Obviously, the film has got edge on the seat kind of thriller quality, which is very rare in Indian cinema. I think the editor Jabin Merchant has just done a fantastic job of sustaining the pace, keeping it going. Navdeep himself keeps you on your toes. He keeps it a tightly paced film, under 2 hours. So I think it all comes together very well. It is every urban couple's nightmare, and you're sitting through it. It's harrowing, and Anushka Sharma, I think, just made a wise choice in going and backing this film, producing it, starring in it, and obviously carries the film very, very ably on her shoulders. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I think there is, at the kernel of thought, something that could have been very B-grade, very masala-fied movie, purely because in terms of plot line, there is very little going on. I think the moment they imbue some subtext to this storyline, it starts making a lot more sense. It starts being a movie which is not just about someone killing another person. It's about honor killing, for instance, which is something that remains in news all the time. And Haryana has shown in just the way that we would imagine it to be the dystopia that it could possibly be. It also looks at the whole urban, rural, the divide and the rage, and how India per se, the moment you get out of metropolitan cities becomes another world altogether, and that is a nightmare we're talking about that this Gurgaon couple goes through. Gurgaon in itself, if you look at it in some form, it can be a nightmarish city, at least from the newspapers that we read. So yes, I mean, it has a very strong urban resonance in terms of a storyline, besides the fact that at a very basic slasher picture level, it seems to work as well.
You know, given the fact that we've obviously liked the film, I think I have two serious problems with it which constitute my oh my god moments. One is the fact that it is so heavily lifted, inspired by Eden Lake. I think in this day and age, in 2015, people have really no business lifting films like this. We see Korean films being filched and all that, but mainstream Hollywood films, unless you've got the rights, you've taken them officially, doing this, I think, is not kosher. 8 years ago, Navdeep did his homage to Chinatown,
yes,
with Manorama 6 Feet Under. Everybody appreciated the film. It was well loved, well received. It's taken him 8 years. It's tough getting a film made, but I still have a problem with the fact that it was so heavily lifted. The second thing is, I think, the rural-urban divide. There's this kind of a black and white situation that is created. We've seen retribution. We've seen the desire for revenge played out just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at most, in Badlapur. A very fine film again. We had our problems with it, but at the same time, it tells you, and that is played out, this desire for revenge played out over 15 years.
Right.
This is played out in the course of a single night. So in that sense, but I thought that was far more nuanced and far more depth in the film about it. This one was a little too pat for me.
Well, I agree with you at some level. I think the credibility of a story in some form or the other, depends so much on how few coincidences there are. And I think there are far too many coincidences so far as the plot line is concerned. There are also, portions which you will only enjoy if you're willing to, go through that whole suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the details of those because,
Yes.
that would be, giving the movie away. But yes, I mean, so far as adaptation is concerned, I think it's a high time, and everyone's doing it anyway. It's just, just put it out there. Let people know. Nobody will mind it, because so far as this film is concerned, there are certain very strong portions. There is a certain subtext which they do a fine job of. Nobody would have minded if they just told us there is also an adaptation from another film.
Well, despite all the misgivings that I have articulated, I still think this is a film that has to be seen, ought to be seen, and perhaps you should watch it, if not on the screens already, then certainly on television, though I suspect it's A-rated, so probably theatre mein dekho.
Well, unlike the sound of its title, NH10 is not a road film. It's certainly not a happy film. It's a film with lots of startling images. It's a gruesome movie. If you're watching the theatre, I suppose you should not catch the last night show. If you live in Gurgaon, definitely not. Otherwise, theatre but definitely dekho if you haven't seen it already.